Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon, and I am your host. And today is the June News and AMA Ask Me Anything About Chocolate or Cocoa episode. Before I dive into today's episode, just two quick bits of housekeeping. One of which is that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life. You can go there right now. If you're not a member, you can click on the join button. There's always a free tier, but if you do have the financial resources to support the work that I'm doing here, there are membership options beginning at $5 a month. The other bit of housekeeping is if you would like to participate in today's episode, you can drop a comment in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook and LinkedIn, and let me know. I'll get the comment, I'll get the question up on screen, and I'll do my best to get it asked and answered during the course of the episode. And with that, let us go and jump into today's episode. So for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I create a post. And this is the post for today's episode, right? And it's basically a run of show, and it will cover the topics that I'm going to cover during the course of the over the episode. And you can watch along, or you can go back to it if you're listening at a later time. And so that's why I put this together. It's a prompt, because this is not scripted, so I can respond very, very easily to comments that come in as they come in, questions as they come in, and then also to just remind me about what it is that I'm going to do. I start every single one of these episodes by taking a look at the current price of cocoa. This is a website called barchart.com, and what we'll do is we'll take a look at where the price of cocoa is. If you're involved in making chocolate, or you buy chocolate and use it, right, for confectionery and other items, just spending a few moments on a weekly basis, on Monday when you walk in, on Friday before you leave, just figuring out what the price of cocoa is doing is not a bad idea. And so what we've got now is that the cash price of cocoa is at $3,800 a metric ton. And in 2 years from now, the market is pricing in about $4,000 a metric ton. It's interesting. We can scroll down a little bit, and it says that July ICE New York cocoa is down, and London is down. Cocoa prices gave up an early advance and turned lower after updated weather forecasts called for drier conditions. You may remember that during the last episode, I mentioned that the CEO of Barry Callebaut, Heinz Schumacher, said that if El Nino shows up, we're going to see, a rise of 2,000 pounds sterling per metric ton. Apparently, the industry is hanging on there being good weather news, and they're betting on there being good weather news. Excessively short position by funds could exacerbate any short covering reality in New York cocoa. Wow, short positions, right? People are buying a lot of short positions, more than in 3 years. So the market, at least traders, are betting that the price will move down. One thing you may want to do is, if you here at barchart.com, if you click on links over here, what you can do is you can get a price history. And what the price history do is it will show you, what, again, makes sense, what the prices have been. So it's been trading for the most part for the last 2 months in this narrow range between 3,200. It's gone as high as a little over almost 5,000 over the past 90 days. And so just something to be aware of, right? You want to keep on track of where cocoa is going. Now, one thing to really, really understand here is that many big makers are still working through stocks of cocoa that is much more expensive, right? And so we won't see the prices of chocolate or cocoa butter or cocoa powder come down anytime soon. I mean, there are been a lot of systemic shocks that they're been working through because of the rise of cocoa over the high price of cocoa over the last couple of years. So even though the futures price of cocoa is scheduled to be considerably lower, I mean, $4,000 a ton down from almost 13,000 a metric ton is pretty remarkable. But that doesn't mean you should expect the prices of chocolate. It's like gas. The price of oil will spike, right? The price of gas will go up immediately, right? And when the price of oil goes down, the price of gas goes down very, very slowly in comparison. And this is the market that we're seeing right now. So here's one source, barchart.com. There's another chart here at a website called Trading Economics. This is a place that I look to. It's got, I think, better graphing data. So you can take a look at what's going on here in the last month. Where is volatility? It's spiked as high as 4,800. It's down here between 3,800 and 4,000. It's a good chart to look at. It's one of the easiest to comprehend. And I can see, and what they're saying, cocoa futures, market weighed lingering weather-related risks against improving supply prospects. Market participants remain focused on the possible impacts of El Nino as it could hurt cocoa crops in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, which produce. So on the other hand, prospects for recovery for African cocoa production in 2025-26 are limiting further price gains. So one thing to factor in here would be where are cocoa reserves, right? So, which factor into this. The whole idea of a reserve is there to help buffer volatility in the price. And so we need to take a look at that as well, right? So at the same time, there are signs of increased global inventories reserve, right? Latest data showed ICE cocoa inventories rose further to a near 2-year high of almost 2.9 million bags. And that's probably contributing to some of what's going on right now in terms of pricing. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this. There are links. You can go take a look if you're really interested in taking a look at long-term pricing. This trading charts enables you to go back like 50 years or something like that. So you can really take a look at the price volatility. One of the things to notice about this, so I can change, this is set to 1977. So you can, set this to 2025 and you can see all of last year's price movements. But one of the things to know about all of these is that these are in constant dollar terms. So a 2025 dollar is the same thing as a 1977 dollar. There's no obvious way here to work on inflation adjusted prices. So, what is $5,700 in 1977 terms worth in 2025 or 2026 dollars? That's not baked into these charts. You need to do that for yourself. As I recall, the last time I looked would have been earlier this year. A $5,700 a metric ton in 1977 dollars is over $20,000 a metric ton in 2026 dollars. So if the price of cocoa is around $4,800, that's a fraction of what the inflation adjusted price of cocoa might be. Something to consider, that the price of cocoa has stayed very, very flat in constant dollar terms. Even when it was 12,000, it stayed flat in constant dollar terms compared with inflation adjusted terms. So an important factor to consider, right? And if you want, you can go to the ICO website and you can get their stats there. One of the things that's great about this is that you can download all of the entries, or you can have them display all of the entries, and then you could download this to a file. And so if you wanted to go put them into generate your own graphing routine or any other kind of routine, then you can do it locally on a computer. So something to consider about the ICCO prices. I mean, one thing that would be interesting here, I haven't done it, but one thing that would be interesting here would be to go to a company that supplies currency exchange data, so I could find what the central bank exchange rates were for these currencies. So I could look at, what is the difference between pound sterling on the London market and US dollars a metric ton? And is this difference in how the markets perceive things? Or is this a or how much of this price difference is based on how the markets see things differently, and how much of this might be based on exchange rates. Interesting to know. I haven't done that yet. That data tends to be fairly expensive, but I'm hoping to be able to get there at some point soon. Again, if you're watching this, throw in a comment or a question as we go through today's episode. I'll get it up on the screen and I'll get it asked and answered. So one thing that I get a lot of newsletters, and one of the newsletters that I got earlier this week was the Sustainability Awards associated by the Sustainable Packaging Summit. The awards are going to be announced in November, but here are the finalists. And the reason why I put the link here is that if you are interested in where the industry is going with respect to substrates for packaging. So, for example, food safe films. This is a wrapper for gum, but it is a particular composite, a sustainable, recyclable, compostable paper, which has got a barrier coating on it, which makes it suitable for gum. But there's a lot of work which is being done in coated folded carton board, coated, again, this ready meal paperboard ovenable tray, right? The substrate, what we're interested in is the substrate and the coating. So if you're doing something with chocolate, might this be an appropriate thing that to look forward to? Again, if you're buying small amounts of packaging, perhaps not. But this is where the industry thinks the industry is going with it when it comes to producing more sustainable packaging. And by sustainable, they're meaning from cradle to grave sustainability. So what is the cost of manufacturing the stuff, and what are the impact with respect to disposing it, recycling it, composting it, and things like that. And there is actually quite a bit of work that's being done in this area. As you can see, this craft paper, and it looks like this craft paper is being used for packaging, obviously for packaging because this is Sustainable Packaging Summit, but for pouches of one form or another. So we're seeing that, a modified fiber transport package for chilled seafood. That could be interesting, but if you're interested in something other than seafood, maybe you're shipping chocolate, this could be interesting for that. A home compostable soy sauce fish. I think this is pretty interesting, but maybe you don't want a soy sauce fish, but maybe what you want to do is you want to ship a syrup, a liquid, right, in a container that you can squeeze something out of. Ooh, you've got a chocolate sauce or something. This could be pretty cool. Maybe it's adaptable. So lots of things. So this is a bio-based near infrared detectable black pigment. Not entirely sure what that could be used for, but it shows the breadth of the research these companies are doing and potential applications down the road. So you just go take a look at what it is that's going on. Molded fiber made from fallen leaves and bamboo, bio-based pigments. So 2 different iterations on bio-based pigments. High barrier paper for flexible packaging could mean if you're doing flow wrap, right, or you're filling packages. So I just thought this was an interesting source of ideas for where the packaging industry is going. There's a link to this page, right, on the post for today's episode, and you can go take a look at it there. And then in November, I'll make a note of actually talking about who the winners are, do a little deeper dive into what the judges were thinking when they awarded individual applications, the awards that they're giving, because I think it's this notion of sustainability, and however we want to define sustainability, because how the US thinks about sustainability is different from how Europe thinks about sustainability. That as you upgrade your packaging, right, as you pay attention to the way your product looks, can you provide, number one, a less expensive uh, a less expensive packaging for you to purchase, which might deliver um, uh, characteristics, a good unboxing experience, but also pay attention to um, things like, is it recyclable? Is it home compostable? Are there things like those other things that do have an influence on some buyers' decisions and seem to make a lot of sense within the specialty chocolate context. And as the specialty chocolate industry grows larger and larger, um, will become a greater and greater contributor to reducing waste streams. So you know, just something to take a look at, something that I look at when it hits my feeds. All right, next, if you are a member of the Chocolate Life, what you will see is when you go to the homepage, you'll see that there is this weekly news brief, and it's listed as premium. So what that means is I'm logged in, my account is signed in, but let me go to it on Safari where I'm not logged in. If I go, I don't want to join. I'm sorry. I want to update this page. Excuse me. Um, and go look at this, you'll see that I'm not logged in and the post is for premium and paying members. I don't put a lot of stuff behind a paywall. I put some things behind a paywall. And the weekly news brief is one of those things. So if you come here, what you'll do is you'll see every Monday I have an agent that goes and looks at news feeds from a lot of different sources and pulls together a whole bunch of different topics. I get one daily and I get one weekly, and I'm looking through it because I'm looking for ideas for news and news and AMA episodes. I'm looking for ideas for stories, so subjects that I can write about. And here is the entire list of things. So it's broken up into headlines, industry moves, announcements, commodity and policy updates. Not sure why there's an extra space there, and then some forward-looking insight. But if you go to today's post, I just pulled one headline from each of these areas. So the first one is something that a lot of people haven't necessarily considered, but it has been an issue, is that um, Dubai chocolate demand meets the Iran war and weather shocks. And so the price of pistachios is still elevated. Prior to the Dubai chocolate phenomenon, um, well, no, what has happened is that with the rise in interest in quote unquote Dubai chocolate, something that's got pistachio paste in it, would be perhaps the only defining characteristic of Dubai chocolate, pistachio. Um, what we find is that Turkish, US, and Iranian harvests are all below expectations, right? So the price of pistachios is going up. So if you thought Dubai chocolates were, for the most part, expensive, expect them to get more expensive. And the price rise is not entirely dependent upon the cost of cocoa. Just important thing to understand. And it shows how a single product, I mean, a single product, right? Demand for a single product can drive global price changes. It's really quite remarkable, right? Right. Second one is that this is sort of a no-brainer, but this is a news release from a source called Confectionery News, um, and Hershey's next move: rebuilding trust after cocoa cuts controversy. This is something we're starting to see quite a bit. Um, is that there is pretty heavy consumer backlash against um, the reformulation of chocolate products. There's been a huge backlash, excuse me, um, against Reese's peanut butter cups, where the son or grandson of the founder basically said this stuff tastes like crap because of all the formulation changes that have been made, and as a result of consumer outrage at the changes in flavor profile that the company, Hershey's, I believe, is going to be going back to the original recipes of for Reese's peanut butter cups, at least, which is good news. I think that why I think it is good news is that it signals that consumers have a lot of power to get companies to change their minds. That if enough people make enough noise, that something seemingly as simple as fixing peanut butter cups can be done. So, in the context of something like, can we grow the market for specialty chocolate? Can consumers make enough noise to get big chocolate companies um, to change their sourcing practices? Um, can those of us who are really interested in the subject of specialty chocolate get the industry to change? And this is a real positive sign to me that it is possible. Now, sort of ironically, I was watching a story about Butterfingers, and Butterfingers has sort of the reverse problem, which is that they've gone and changed the recipe to make it quote unquote healthier for you. And there's consumer backlash because it's not as crispy and crunchy as it used to be. And the flavor has changed because they're now using more natural ingredients. And there's a backlash to go back to the way it used to be because people say, I like the way it was. I don't care if it's healthy at all, right? It's a candy bar, right, with lots of sugar. Is it supposed to be healthy? The answer is no. So it does work both ways, but it does show that consumer backlash can cause companies, big companies, um, to change their minds. Now, this is not going to affect the whole lot of, might not affect a whole lot of people who are watching this, but it is, if you are in the EU, right? The EU Digital Product Passport goes live in about 6 weeks, 5 6 weeks. So goods in regulated categories, which include chocolate and cocoa derivatives, right? Without a registered machine readable digital passport, face automated EU customs detention, right? So what this might mean, if the way it might affect you, is if you're exporting your product to the EU, you need a digital product passport in order to be able to export your product to the EU. So if you weren't aware of that, you might want to look into what are the requirements. I will, well, it's something I may look into in more detail if people want. Do you want me to look into the EU digital product passport and whether it has an effect on American producers? Let me know, and I will go take a look at it. Um, and then from the forward-looking insight section, chocolate brand owners should expect a split market through year end. So softer bean costs. So the expectation is the price of cocoa will still stay comparatively low relative to what it has been over the past couple of years, but that will be offset by higher compliance costs. So with the EU, the digital passport, the UDR, the corporate social responsibility reporting guidelines, all of these things will have an effect of increasing the cost of chocolate and cocoa related products, and while the cost of cocoa remains soft. So just a consideration that don't expect the cost of chocolate to come down soon, especially if the beans are going into Europe, being processed into Europe, and then being exported to the United States. So if you're looking for berry calabaut that's actually made in Belgium, right, then as opposed to in Vermont, um, or in St. Hyacinth in Canada. These are some of the reasons that the price of chocolate is not going to come down anytime soon. Okay. So this is where I think I want to spend a fair amount of time in this particular episode. Um, Over the last couple of weeks, I spent some time looking at this gentleman by the name of Lane Kilpatrick. I did a deeper dive in a previous episode about, really what alt.cocoa is all about. And one of the observations that I made, and I take a little bit more reporting, take a little bit more depth in here, um, is I asked the question, and apparently No one else that I can find has asked this question, believe it or not. I asked the question. Let me make this a little bigger just because I can. Um, Nobody asked the question about what is the total production capacity of all the alternative cocoa production methods, of which there are predominantly four methods. So, one of which is called precision fermentation. And precision fermentation uses engineered microbes uh, to transform some sort of agricultural input on one end to something that resembles a cocoa powder or a cocoa paste on the other end. The powder, the non-fat powder, may run through one process, and a different precision fermentation uh, pipeline might produce the lipids, the fats, and that the two gets mixed. But in general, precision fermentation uses engineered microbes to do this, or a select subset of microbes to do this. Then you have something called gas fermentation. And fermentation uses engineered microbes, but the feedstock is CO2. So they're capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and for every 1 kilogram of finished product, they pull 3 kilograms of CO2. They use 3 kilograms of CO2. One of the ways this is being used primarily is on fats. They use it to generate lipids. And I think that's interesting because if we can reduce the pressure on, you know, tree-grown cocoa to produce cocoa butter and palm trees to generate fractionated palm kernels, or palm kernel fractions, that could be a good thing. And that all that, quote unquote, what I'm now call engineered. So engineered cocoa, engineered chocolate, so engineered cocoa butter, engineered cocoa powder. I like, or do you prefer synthetic? Just put it in the comments. Would you prefer engineered cocoa or synthetic cocoa? Which sounds scarier? I want it to be scary. I want to be able to get out there with a um, some sort of viral marketing campaign. And so, I mean, for some reason, lab grown doesn't scare people, and it doesn't. And not all of this cocoa is grown. Some of it is fermented. Cell culturing is one of the approaches. Um, but which is scarier, synthetic or engineered? Right? I was thinking engineered because we think about genetically modified and things like that, and so gene engineering or some kind of engineering might be scary to people. But synthetic, right? Um, I don't want us to go into natural, so natural cocoa, right? Because which is synonymous for tree-grown cocoa, and something else. We need a good phrase for um, uh, non-tree grown cocoa. Synthetic, engineered. What do you think? So one of the things I did take a look at. Is I went out and asked an LLM that I use. Again, this is one that's been trained on me. Um, and it said the total installed capacity of all forms of quote unquote alt cocoa, engineered cocoa production. So that includes precision fermentation, gas fermentation. There's natural fermentation or regular fermentation, which uses naturally occurring yeast and bacteria in the environment. It follows, you know, it's not using engineered microbes for it. And then the fourth approach is called cell culturing. And cell culturing is when you take a cocoa bean, you extract material from it, you engineer a line of cocoa cells that will deliver you the output that you want, and then you put that into a vat, a bioreactor, and you give it the right amount of water, you give it the right amount of nutrients, you keep the temperature and the pressure at the proper places, and after a while, you will end up with a something that is an engineered cocoa product. Fat levels are going to differ, but you can engineer using cell culturing. You can engineer a cocoa powder that, for example, has a very high flavanol content. You could also engineer a cocoa that has got a high iron content or magnesium content. You could engineer the cocoa to do a lot of things, and it will take whatever is in the nutrient broth that is fed into the bioreactor, and you'll get something. And so it could be possible to engineer using cell culturing a very high flavonol, very high um, mineral and vitamin content cocoa. You might even be able to play with carbohydrate content. I mean, they're it's very, very flexible. Um, but if you look at all four forms of alt cocoa, engineered cocoa production, what you find is the total installed capacity is about 25,000 metric tons across all four of the different um, production methods. Right? And that's installed capacity, not necessarily how much production there is. So that is the installed capacity. And if you think about that, and this is not a good comparison, but it's the easy one to do. That represents about 1% of the cocoa production from just Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. And the reason why it's not a straightforward comparison, more work needs to be done, is I'm looking at the output of these fermentation methods, these engineered cocoa production methods, and comparing it to cocoa bean production. And what I'd really need to do is I need to be able to take, the beans. What I need to do is I need to roast and crack and winnow. So a metric ton becomes 700 kilos. I now need to take the nibs. I probably need to grind them. There's a loss in the grinder. I now need to run it through some sort of press, and I get cocoa butter and a cocoa powder. Cocoa powder is rarely 0% fat. So it's not a great comparison. But it turns out that total production, right, if we want to think about it that way, represents about 1% of the harvest just from Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana alone. And I asked myself, what's the fuss about? What's the fuss? I mean, so here's part of the challenge. We have the mainstream confectionery news. So these are the outlets that if you were in industry news, you'd be looking at confectionery news, confectionery production, you'd look at Kennedy Confection, International Confectionery, Cocoa Radar, Food Navigator. There are a bunch of outlets that report on this. And very few of them are really pushing back on the industry line on what they're doing and what the scale is and the impact that they're going to be making and how they're pitching it. And so I want to know what all the fuss is about. And has anyone else asked the question? And why all these engineered cocoa alternatives are being hailed as the future of chocolate. And so it's really kind of weird. So this is me on LinkedIn. And I did just a simple search for lab grown cocoa. And here's an article. So a gentleman by the name of, or a person, I'm assuming gentleman, unfortunately, sorry about that, someone named Kunal Sethi did a link to, and just said, California cultured chocolate builds smooth and seductive. So I haven't done the follow-up to find out who Kunal Sethi is. I'm not sanguine that I will find much. No photograph. I'd have to go. The website is, I need to find out. It's impossible. Oh, it's a Substack. I need to go find out what this is. But here's the point, that they appear to be responding to a company called Prithvi Ventures. And if you go look at what Prithvi Ventures talks about, number one, you'll say, they're an investor in California culture, right? I don't know Sethi's background. I don't know, where they can make the kind of claim. If they taste it, build smooth and seductive. I don't know what they're talking about. But this Prithvi Ventures, I mean, it's really, really interesting. So I'm going to read a bit for you. If you have a LinkedIn account, this is from 8 months ago. You can go and search for this. But it says, chocolate is getting squeezed as cocoa prices spiked. Everyone talks about rationing and shrinkflation instead of rebuilding supply. So everyone talks about rationing and shrinkflation. So consumers, are talking about rationing. I haven't heard any talks about rationing chocolate. Shrinkflation is an issue, not just in chocolate, in a lot of places, right? So Prithi Ventures invested in California Cultured. They start with a living cocoa bean cell. Instead of planting it in soil, they put it in a liquid environment and guide it over thousands of passages so it grows exactly the traits they want, right? So this explains the cell culturing product. You take a particular cell, it's got some of the products you want, and then you use evolutionary pressure to be able to guide the direction. So you can develop a a cell that will deliver the characteristics that you're looking for, right? You're not farming trees on a 3-year cycle. Nobody farms three trees on a 3-year cycle, right? It might take a year and a half to 3 years for a tree to become productive. It's different from a cycle. You're growing the tissue that becomes chocolate. You're growing the tissue that becomes chocolate. This changes the time frame, right? Building a new cell line takes time. They don't say how long it takes. I first interviewed the people at California Cultured back in 2021, and they're just coming into commercial production now. And so when it takes time to build a new cell line, it may be multiple years, 3-year cycle. I don't know how long. Well, now that they've got the first one, maybe future ones may take less time. But how long that cycle time is to develop a new cell line, I think depends a lot on what the characteristics are that you're looking for in this cell culture and how far away it is from what currently exists. Probably intuitively, the longer it's going to take. But once the line is ready, right? So we take, in human terms, we take the equivalent of a stem cell, right? And we guide the stem cell into doing what it is that we're looking for, but it's a cocoa stem cell, right? In a way, we get what it is that we're looking for. You can make cocoa in about a week. So you can make cocoa. It is possible to make cocoa. I just this. The point of view here is wrong. It's like you can make cocoa in about a week. So what this tells us is that a batch in a bioreactor is going to take about a week. You take the cell culture, all of the nutrient inputs that are necessary, you put it in a bioreactor, you control temperature, pressure, other kinds of things. Maybe you need to add more nutrient solution over the course of the week, whatever it is, right? And at the end of the week, you've got cocoa. One thing that's not clear to me, and it's not, and I need to spend a little bit more attention on this. I haven't done it yet because it's just occurred to me in the last day or two to do this, is that how much water is in the bioreactor. And the reason why I mention that is that dewatering, removing water from something, is really expensive thermodynamically. You need a lot of energy to be able to remove the water from a wet product. And we need to do a total life cycle assessment, a cradle to grave life cycle assessment, because people, you may remember if you were listening to my episodes on Lane Kilpatrick, the first one where he talked about lab grown cocoa, all he talked about was water, but he didn't talk about energy. So it would be interesting to know what that energy. So is this 1 week include drying time? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's 3 days in the bioreactor, and so I get 2 batches a week. But if I've got a 1,600 liter bioreactor, I'm responding to a LinkedIn comment to somebody said, "Ooh, it's the future is here because California Cultured has a 1,600 liter bioreactor now." It's really not the size of the bioreactor; it's the throughput. How long does it take to produce a metric ton of dry cocoa? Right? Not how big is my tank. And I'm sort of wondering, is this, pardon, right? I don't need to worry about demonetizing because none of these is no episode of Pod Safe Chocolate is monetized. Is this a new dick measuring contest? Ooh, who's got the biggest bioreactor? I don't think that's how we're going to determine success, right? But it says I can make cocoa in a bioreactor in weeks, not months, not years. Well, I mean, that's sort of interesting. Once I have cocoa beans in my factory, I can make chocolate in hours. It does take some years for a tree to become productive, but there are hundreds of millions of productive trees in the world right now. And so I wonder about the phrasing, right? So not months, not years. That means real responsiveness. When a customer wants hundreds of thousands of tons of cocoa powder, cocoa, right? With a specific taste and aroma, you choose the right cell line and just run with it. A few days later, you have product at volume, right? And this is a phrasing I want to push back at, right? Because what I know is that the installed capacity for everything is 25,000 metric tons globally across all of the companies that are involved in this. It's not production capacity. So this is an investor, so Prithvi Ventures, who's making a statement, a material statement about the capabilities of their one of the companies that they're investing in that is entirely misleading, right? If I wanted to have hundreds of thousands of tons of a particular product with a specific taste and aroma, that I could have it in a couple of weeks, a few days later, they have product volume. What's that? A few days later, is that a metric ton? Is that volume? This is really, really um, important to understand that the way the industry is reporting about the capabilities and what the current state of the capabilities of engineered cocoa, engineered chocolate, are completely different what they go on. More importantly, quality matters. So California Cultures reports that 80% of blind tasters can't tell lab grown from traditional, right? So it would be interesting. I mean, maybe, right? So at this particular case, California Cultured hired a firm to do this, and we don't have actually any of the data. So this is a company pushing its own product. Um, we all know that every company reports everything 100%, right? True. I mean, I have to see the entire report. Now that it's there, I'm going to go look at it. I'm going to go look for a CNBC article about this. I have a source now, and I can go find out what they actually reported. The go-to-market is saying co-brand with chocolate makers who already own consumer trust. So they have California does have a deal with Meiji. This keeps flavor houses in the loop while fixing the weak link volatile supply. All right. So what they're doing here is this is the future of chocolate. Supply, reliable and programmable, don't ration chocolate. I don't know that anybody ever was, is rebuild how we make it, sample our new products. And here is, there's a link to a video. I'm going to go watch this YouTube video. But this is the challenge that these companies who are investing in these technologies are basically saying abandon tree grown cocoa, that the future of chocolate is something that is grown in a lab, right? And you can't taste the difference, right? I don't know that that's true because I haven't actually. I mean, it would be interesting to know, and I'll go talk to the California culture people, is that show me chocolates which were made from three different origins, cocoa from three different origins, and are they different? You know, so there's a lot of stuff we don't know yet. But I wanted to highlight this because I mean these are articles about this, right? That are for the most part that can be found just on LinkedIn, right? And they're in my feed, and I can search for lab grown cocoa and I can find it. So I'm about to develop a bot, and the bot is gonna go and take these posts, and it's going to go and then take a look at um, how the how this how the market is presented, which I think is really important, right? So who is it? All the chocolate companies and all the investment managers and people who are pushing that the future of chocolate is engineered cocoa, and where is the pushback coming from? Um, uh, so this is a pushback. Is this raping nature? Lab grown cocoa, part 3 of 4. Part 3 of 4 is where this is the Lane Kilpatrick series, and part 3 is where Kilpatrick starts talking about gene engineering. Um, right? So chocolate is changing, not in flavor, not in technique. Um, and I'm going to have, so explore chocolate, bean to bar chocolate maker. Um, what if instead of broking a system, we're stepping away from it entirely? And this is one of the threads that I want to go explore is how many people are going to we're going to push back against big chocolate and agritech and say that this gives big chocolate an off ramp to abandon their responsibilities to cocoa farmers and cocoa farming and to countries and to producing countries for the devastation that have caused with respect to illegal labor and deforestation and other things over the course of the last 50 years, since the 1970s probably, but specifically since 2001 with the signing of the Harkin-Engel Protocol. And just a quick note, not only is this the 25th anniversary of my entry as a professional in chocolate and cocoa, but September 19th is the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Harkin-Engel Protocol. At least I took a look at all the signature pages, and they all say September 19th, even, right? Um, but so um, I reached out to Terry Collingsworth of International Rights Advocates, and I said, "Hey, this is the 25th year of the signing of Harkin-Engel. Let's do a deep dive into Harkin-Engel uh, for September. So either the Tuesday or Friday, or before, or the Tuesday after. The 19th is a Saturday. I'm going to be joined by Terry. I'm hoping that other people who have been very vocal about this, perhaps Mickey Mastrati, who was the producer and director of The Dark Side of Chocolate and that series of movies, will join me in that episode. So just just a quick note that 2026 is the 25th anniversary of the signing of Harkin-Engel. And I will, at some point in the next little while, do a sort of history of Harkin-Engel and its torturous roadmap in advance of getting on an episode with Terry, at least, to discuss this right around the enactment of it. But here is a chocolate without cacao, the quiet shift from farming to formula. Again, this is, I think, one of the big things this is one of the big topics that they're so much interested in the mainstream confectionery news coverage of this. And a lot of the coverage, which comes from the the tech rah-rah and investor segments, which are talking about, oh, we have a technology we can invest in, and it does all these cool things, and it gives us all this control, right? And nobody talks about what's going to happen with the farmers. Well, right now it's just 1% of the market, right? And that's capacity, installed capacity, not actual production. But my contention is that if you're going to invest billions, so billions, how much is it going to cost to build a factory that will produce 1,000 metric tons of engineered cocoa per month? And not just what is the cost of the physical space. So, what is the building cost, right? What are the bioreactors and ancillary processing machinery going to cost? What is the energy cost associated with doing that? It may not, cell culturing may not require a lot of water, but that's only one aspect of the inputs to consider. Important in California. I'm in Arizona. Very important to consider water usage. Um, oh, and don't get me started on people investing in water futures. People are it's going to be a new market that is emerging. I started seeing something that I will follow. In any event, right? My thinking is that so I understand about big chocolate wanting to de-risk their supply chain, right? Which is one of the reasons why they're doing this. They're de-risking their supply chain, and if you're a public company, your investors would be would be calling for you to do this, right? Um, you as a company have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize your return to shareholders if you are not finding ways to de-risk your supply chain. So change your formulations to reduce your dependence on tree-grown cocoa or cocoa butter. Replace the cocoa butter with cocoa butter equivalents and cocoa butter replacements, right? These are things that big companies can do. Do you take it so far that you have to remove the word chocolate from the front of the package because you now have so much alternative fats that even in the EU, you can no longer be labeled chocolate. In the UK, you can no longer be labeled chocolate. That's an interesting question. But it turns out that there aren't a whole lot of people who are pushing back. And so I will reach out to Matt Green, right? And I will join forces with him. We are connected. I'm going to read this and I'm going to take a look at his article on Substack and I'm going to add it to the list of sources that I'm going to have my LLM look at and synthesize and work on to say, where is what is common language? What are people talking about? Where the disagreements are? I mean, I think that's a really, really good usage of an LLM to do that kind of analytics on things. So Mike T, so he's answering this question. This question of will you buy it is one of the things that does show up in the mainstream confectionery news reporting about this, is that just because you make it, that doesn't mean that people will buy it. And even if there are positive reports on it, will it have broader mainstream acceptance? I don't know the answer to that question. Nobody does yet, but we'll figure it out. Oh, here's me. So it's nice to know that my stuff shows up here, the chocolate life, right? By the time the world wakes up, the impact of lab-grown cocoa on their health, others. So here's something. Wakes up to the impact of lab-grown cocoa on their health. So this author, a private advisor for executives in international agribusiness, is focusing on an alarmist, Lane Kilpatrick, right? I hear that consumers don't care and are willing to eat lab-grown chocolate. I hope they'll start caring soon enough. But the focus here is on health with no mention of what might be the potential impact in farmers, right? And that for me is one of the main considerations. If we give big chocolate an off-ramp to shorten their supply chains at all levels, right, and enable them to abandon their, I think, ethical responsibilities to the farmers that they've been taking unfair advantage of for hundreds of years, right? And certainly since well before Cadbury's abandoning Sao Tome and Principe, which sort of ironically led to Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana becoming the largest producers in the world. But right, this is what I want to understand. I want to understand like how many people are leaning on Lane Kilpatrick and his rhetoric, right? How influential is he? This is a pharmacist who was struck off in California, right? He lost his license. He surrendered his license. And he calls himself a hormone specialist, but apparently has no training, right? In hormone therapy. He has no medical degree. His degree is in pharmacy. And he is now, people are paying attention to him when it comes to his views on lab-grown cocoa, which I think are alarmist. This is posted twice, not entirely sure why. It shows up on the feed. Lab-grown cocoa is on its way. General Secretary of Federation of Estate Agents in Malta. Sort of curious. This is the another Lane Kilpatrick video. Anyway, so I want to go through Mark Rodriguez exploiting cacao farmers for decades and then marketing lab-grown chocolate as the ethical solution is wild. This is absolutely, this is the outrage. This is the ethical point of view about abandoning cocoa farmers and cocoa farming, which I think is the emotional aspect of an appeal, a counter appeal that should be made. Let me know. It's for me, it's really, really wild about that. Oh, right, Lane Kilpatrick, right? So more Lane Kilpatrick. I'm obviously pushing back on Kilpatrick. Here's another talk about a new definition for risk aversion. So this is hard to understand. there's a lot of content in this area. I don't know that it's hard to understand, but it's difficult to tease out the nuances. I will say that, and I do this for a living. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is going and getting the content and then summarizing it and trying to pull out the topics that seem to dominate the conversation and who the sources are and what the sources are. So, are the sources technology companies? Are the sources big chocolate companies? Are the sources investors? Are the sources advisors to investors? It's going to be a large project, but it's one I want to do. And it's one I don't see anybody else doing. So, right? And that's that. So here, thinking about what to name and label cocoa alternatives, right? And so I don't think it should be allowed for companies. So I don't think it should be in the US at the FDA, which is where the Code of Federal Regulations 21.163, which determines what chocolate is and what chocolate can contain and can't contain if you want to label it chocolate. And then there are also in the Code of Federal Regulation, there are labeling guidelines. And so I don't think that cocoa-free chocolate should be allowed as a descriptor, right? You shouldn't be able to, we shouldn't have a new standard of identity for quote unquote cocoa-free chocolate. I think that makes no sense because only one of them, so cell cultured, is actually derived from cacao, but the current definition is it comes from cacao nibs, right? And cell culturing is not from nibs, so it doesn't fit the definition. Engineered cocoa. So I think that the front of the label should be made with engineered cocoa, right? That should be on the front of a label, right? And so people will know that it's not real chocolate. So I think that that would be one thing that mandatory reporting in terms of labeling can be doing, right? In the EU already, and in the UK, you can't have more than 5% of a natural cocoa butter fat, right? If you want to label it chocolate. And so if people, so we already have this regimen that says if you're not using cocoa butter, which has to be derived from cocoa nibs, by the way, in the United States, you can't label it chocolate. And so I think that what we need to do as fans of chocolate is go and work with regulators in the United States, in the US, in the UK, in the EU, and elsewhere, and then make sure that these engineered cocoa alternatives cannot be labeled as chocolate. Engineered chocolate, synthetic chocolate, do you have an alternative? I propose chocolate. I don't like that anymore. I want to use engineered or something like it in the description. Right? Almost done for today. All this work takes a lot of time, right? And one of the things that is new for the Chocolate Life for my 20th anniversary. So this month, it represents 25 years since I put out my shingle on the internet at chocophile.com to become a professional chocolate critic, journalist, educator, and consultant. And there is now a lifetime membership option, right? You can go click on this link right here, this brown button, and you can learn more about what it means to be a lifetime member, consulting hours, and more. Lots of benefits for becoming a lifetime member. And one of the things that you're doing is you're giving me the resources to be able to go and perform this work. So just want to do a quick ad read in the middle. Learn more about lifetime membership, right? Completely optional. If you want to explore other membership alternatives, you can go click on the join button in the top nav of the Chocolate Life. Free memberships always available, right? But if you do have the resources, then I do appreciate your support. And then finally, for this, Ikigai. I've mentioned Ikigai a number of times in the past. So Ikigai is a Japanese term, right? Translations vary, but it could mean the joy of living, the sense that your life has value. One of the things that it is not a straightforward meaning, a straightforward translation of Ikigai is not the French raison d'être, reason for being, right? Ikigai is much more nuanced than, oh, chocolate is my reason for being. That doesn't say much. But Ikigai, right, goes here and says, so it is the mix of something that I am good at, right? Something that I love, something that the world needs, and something that I can be compensated for, right? And for me, that's 90% of the way to the definition of the chocolate life. Ikigai is the core of the chocolate life, of living La Vida Coco, right? I found that doing this stuff around cocoa was something that I was good at, something that around chocolate and cocoa. I could take a complex topic, break it down, and communicate with people about chocolate at a bunch of different levels. You want to talk about the physics, I could talk about the physics. You want to talk about the chemistry, we could talk about the chemistry. You want to talk about history, biology. All of these things are part of what fascinates me around chocolate, right? It is something that my training, my background sort of set me up to do, right? Right? My chocolate life, right? It's something that I love to do. I mean, right? I'm working with chocolate in one form or another every day, right? And working with chocolate makes people happy, makes me happy, and I can make people happy with what it is that I'm doing. That's fabulous. That's the definition of it, right? What the world needs. Yeah, I think that the world needs more people like me, right? More people who take a look at chocolate from the spectrum all over the place and communicate with people about it. Not just about tasting, not just about this, not just about the other, but I can engage. The world needs more people who can engage in chocolate and cocoa, right? At a deep level and demonstrate from personal experience that you know what you're talking about, right? When I started in 2001, I was a fraud in many respects. I didn't feel like I was not a fraud until um, 2 years later, in 2003, when I went to my first cocoa farm in Ecuador, and I realized, that experience took everything that I had learned from a book and crystallized it. Personal experience, things that I only knew intellectually, I now knew physically and emotionally, right? And that drive to understand, how does cocoa and chocolate culture different between Brazil and Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador and Colombia and Venezuela, all places that I've been, right? Or places where I've been to farms, right? And how is that different from Panama and Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mexico, all places that I've been, um, and visited farms. Um, that is something that I think the world needs more of, right? Not just focusing on tasting, not having primarily a book learning understanding about the history, but having that deep immersion. And I hope you agree with that too. I hope that's one of the reasons, right? And it's something you can get paid for. So yeah, people pay me for my expertise in doing this. The chocolate life, importantly, right, adds one more component to it. And I hope this is part of one of the reasons why we're all engaged here. And so the way the chocolate life differs from Ikigai is that Ikigai has four parts to it, right? Right. So what am I good at? What I love, what the world needs, and what I can be paid for. Those are the core aspects of Ikigai. What the chocolate life adds to that is to inspire others to find and follow their own chocolate life. Unfortunately, it's freezing for me. I don't know it's freezing for you. Um, to find and follow your own chocolate life, this idea of inspiring. And I think about it a little like, I'm a teacher at grade school. I'm going to have an influence on people. And I have no idea how that influence will spread, what it will look like, how far it will go. Right? And unless um, one of my students, right, I won't know not entirely sure what's happening here today. Sorry, it's worse than normal. Um, but as a teacher, I never really know um, where my influence will spread unless somebody comes back to me, right, and tells me, "Oh, remember I was in your third grade class and blah blah blah." Right? I know that what it is that I do because I've been doing it for 25 years. The Chocolate Life has been around since January of 2018. My book has been around since 2000. The Chocolate was been to 2008. Discover Chocolate was published in 2007. Right, the number of people who I meet around the world who come to me, who correspond with me, tell me that the work that I'm doing is important to them and has inspired them, right? And I hope that it will inspire you as well. May not be chocolate, right? But I encourage you to find something that you really love. I think that's the most important aspect of this. Find something you really love that you also happen to be good at, right? Right? If there is a chance that what you're doing and how you do it is something that other people enjoy, right? They want to learn from you. They want to share your experiences with you in some way or another. Really, 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 really valuable. If it's something that can inspire them as well to go and find something in their life that they love and they're good at and that other people want to know about, all the better, right? If you can find a way to make it a living out of it, man, absolutely, you've hit the jackpot. You will be happy, enjoying what you love, right? And other people will let you know that what you're doing, is valuable to them, and hopefully you'll be able to pay your bills, raise a family, and do all those things. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining me here today on this episode of Pod Shave Chocolate. And to remind you, as I always do, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.